Role of the acoustic in modern worship guitar, part 2. In the last lesson, we looked at keys A and E, and we looked at how to take just the basic chords and infuse the progressions with some common yet sort of fresh sounding ways to play different chords. We're going to continue in this lesson doing the same thing, only we're going to work with keys G, C, and D. So let's go ahead and start with G. You have seen G played like this. You've probably seen them played a lot of different ways, but there's G. Now, I'm going to modify this G by taking my third finger and putting it on the B string 3rd fret. I'm also going to take my first finger off and mute my A string. That's going to give me a G5. Very nice, wide open sounding G. G1, G5, but G number option 2. Feel free to use both. All right, now for C, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my second finger and I'm going to move it to the A string on the C and make sure that one's not being played much, at least right now. My 1 and my 4. G to C. Talk about keeping common notes for smooth strumming. Now, for your 5 chord or your D chord, I'm going to leave these the same, and I'm going to put my first finger on my G string, 2nd fret. It's a D sus. Now, you can play with these. You can do all sorts of things, and if you've watched any of my other series, particularly chords, capos, and simple melodies, you'll pick up on some of that stuff. But remember, we don't want to do a lot of that stuff as an acoustic guitar player in a large worship band setting. We don't want a lot of moving notes. That's the other instrument's job. So a lot of times we want static stuff. Now, if you're playing a 5 sus chord or a D sus, and the song clearly doesn't call for a sus in a certain place, in other words, maybe it specifies a sus to a normal, then you'd probably want to follow that if the music dictates it. But you don't want to move around all over the place doing stuff like this. That sounds kind of cool, but in the context that we're going for, we want to be constant and let the other stuff fill the mix up with some of those little tinkly things. All right, so our 1, our 4, and our 5. 1, 4, 5, G, C, and D. Our minor 6, E minor. I'm leaving these the same. That's going to sound great in the mix, having these kind of always there. 2nd fret, A string, 1st finger. E minor 7. Now remember, in the key of E, we talked about the idea of doing a E over a G sharp. The equivalent in the key of G would be a G over B. That means a G chord, a foundational G chord with a B note as the bass note. G/B. So you could shy away from playing the root note if that calls for it and let the bass player handle it, or you could do this. So this form gets played all over the neck. I mean, a lot of starting out worship guitar players, especially if they're leading and singing at the same time, will take this form and they'll capo it all over the place in different keys, which we're going to get to in the next lesson. Before we do that, let's move on to the key of C. Out of the keys that we're studying, the key of C is still probably the most awkward and leaves the fewest cool options. But we're going to do it anyway. When I'm playing in C, I just play the C. You could do your C2 or your C add 9 if you wanted to include the third. Transitioning to the 4 chord, this one's tough for some people because they just don't know what to do. It's an F. Your 4 chord's an F. You know, you have a bar chord or you have this mini chord here. Either way, it's sort of a bar chord. And it just breaks the flow. It's hard to, even for an advanced guitar player, that can be difficult. Sounds fine to transition, but this might be a little bit more flowy. Now, I will also do some kind of middle chord movement. I do it in this key. I don't do it in some of the other keys because, again, we want to stay away from some of that stuff. But in this context, since it's in the middle of the chords, going from C to a C2, and then doing the same thing on your F. This would be an F major 7 chord. I've got the 7th degree of the scale in there. There's my standard F. That's an F note. We're lowering it a half step, leaving it open to an E. An E in the key of F is the 7th. That doesn't work all the time. And so you may find that the song is too rockin' or something, and that doesn't work. So you will have to do a full, or just leave it off. Be selective about what you're strumming so you don't get that top note. And then for G, I go back to my G5 that we studied in the key of G. So that's the first way for the key of C. Oh, we forgot the 6th. That would be A minor. This is kind of neat because you've got C. All you have to do is take your 3rd finger off. And you've got an A minor 7 chord. That works great in this context. 6. 4 coming up. 5. Another way you can do this is using this same form that we worked on earlier, the G5. You take these 2 fingers, you plant this one, 3rd fret, D string, 2nd fret, G string for your 1st finger. That's a variety of an F. Some other notes in there. There's your F, there's your C, and there's your G. So you've got your 1, 4, 5, 6. Keeping this note, or you could even do that, keeping these notes the same. So that's, again, these, you're making the chords a bit more complicated with some tones that may clash with, depending on what the program or the content of the song is. So you have to use your ear, but this should get you started. So 1, 4, 1, 5, 4, 1, 5, 1. All right, in the next scene, we'll move on to the key of D. The last of our 5 keys, the key of D. Now, once you start getting the capo involved, the number system, and you learn your neck, you can take these positions, capo all over the place, and play in any key. We're utilizing C, A, G, E, and D because those are your foundational, major, open position chords. So we're keeping it simple and we're basing it off of that. Now, the key of D Here's your 1. Your 4 is G. Your 5 is A. I like to do this. D2 to my 4. Now, I like to leave sometimes, again, it depends on the content of the song. Leave that open. Creates sort of a G6 tonality. Now for your 5, again, I like to do a little bit of middle of the chord movement. This is an A7 sus4. That means that it's a dominant 7 because it's the 5 chord in the key. But it also is lacking the 3rd because I've moved what is traditionally a 3rd in an A chord up to the 4. So I like to do that and then resolve to either a standard A7 or an A, just a standard A chord. So that would sound like this. 4, 5. Resolve to the 7 with the 3rd. Now what's really cool about this is when you go to the 6th chord, which is B minor, another one of those that it's a derivative of A minor, so the natural inclination is to just bar it, but you interrupt those beautiful open strings that end up ringing, and then you're, potentially, if you're starting out, your strumming can get off, and connect the chords when you can. So your 6th chord, which is your B minor, I like to play like this. It's your D2, but I've taken my second finger. My second finger has taken the job of my first finger, and then I put my first finger on the A string, 2nd fret. So, if we work that in, 1, 6, 4, 5 sus, 5, 1, 6, 4, 5 sus, 5, as opposed to regular chords. Back to the cooler way. So you can hear, particularly in that example, but with all the examples we've done over the past 2 lessons, that the chords just sound more glued together. And part of the reason for that is that the positions end up being similar. You don't change your entire hand position. You don't change all of the notes. And to me, especially on that last example, it was the difference between a flowing, smooth chord progression and kind of a beginner-sounding thing. I didn't really change anything except for the chord voicings I was using. And whether it's these chord voicings or whether it's stuff that you come up with on your own, when you're coming up with chord progressions or ways to connect chords in this setting, changing as few notes as possible between the chords, keeping the harmonic structure, of course, the same so that it works with the rest of your band. But this way is going to help you fulfill that background, pocket playing acoustic guitar player. And there's tons you can do in this realm, and I encourage you to check out many other series on JamPlay that take this far beyond what we're covering here. But if you're an acoustic guitar player as a worship leader or band leader in a band, this right here is where you're going to start. So in the next lesson, we're going to get out the capo, and we're going to take a look at moving some of these ideas around the neck a little bit, and we're going to get a little bit more into the caged system. So you're going to be able to not just take your 1, your 6, your 4, and your 5, but start committing to memory in these different forms what those other chords are, your 2, your 3. So, see you there.